Welcome. I'm happy to have you joining me now on a journey to awaken spiritually here on Awaken or Sleep Trying. I'm your guide, Tree, and we have such a journey tonight. For many of us, the world is purely physical with nothing more than the three dimensions in front of us. Yet, when we close our eyes, some spark of creativity still exists. This spark is supernatural. Even though we often separate ourselves from our own bodies, it's hard to come to terms with this supernatural aspect, dividing the mind from the brain. How accurate is to say that we have an eternal aspect of ourselves? Do you believe you're destined to disappear? Is the circle of life truly a closed circle wherein the end is final? Of course, there are plenty of people who think in this way. Why, you couldn't be taken seriously at all in the scientific community if you got caught talking about something so theoretical as a soul. It is as if science has become a religion in which one can be excommunicated. Theories should entice the scientific mind, not repel it. It's hard to imagine that it's come to this, until you understand that spark of creativity only stays with you if you nurture it, which is to say that the scientific communities of the 20th and 21st century are lacking entirely in creativity. Of course, it isn't just existential theories that would get you expelled. I have a list of dozens of facts that would sentence one to a barrage of ridicule and mockery. For example, dragons were in the Encyclopedia Britannica early editions. Non-fiction. Giant lizards were reportedly witnessed a few hundred years ago. Though we won't be discussing much cryptozoology here, I do find it strange how something so benign could warrant so much aggression. If I were instead to talk about the efficacy of experimental injections, then I would of course understand the impending crucifixion. This is logical because of the billions of tax dollars fleeced from the people every year. This must continue to fund the Bill Gates super yacht. When we observe human social behavior, we discover that adding context is the difference between a solid fact and a wild conspiracy theory. For instance, you likely recently realized that the pharmaceutical industry profits by treating your symptoms rather than making you well. In fact, making you well would be a fumble in their eyes. Given this context, it now becomes conceivable that a drug company would microdose us with poison for profit. In fact, if you've been paying close attention over the years, you may remember DDT. For the youth, DDT was a poison we let authority figures spray directly onto our children. Of course, every government-funded agency said that it was perfectly safe to be consumed by any age. If you're a conspiracy buff, then you're also aware of the Tuskegee projects, an equally or even more dark experiment that has gone from theory to conspiracy fact. For now, I'll omit the details of these events, but just know if you Google the Tuskegee project, you'll find dozens of articles downplaying the atrocities of it. Just another example of the government using its people as guinea pigs with no accountability. Bringing us back to current events, it has been disclosed that COVID vaccines were made with experimental RNA technology with next to no testing. Okay, Tree, you're thinking, so we made a mistake. Though, this is not an exception. This is part of a disturbing trend, their modus operandi, if you will, and frankly, it's a pattern they hope you don't recognize. But why, though? Throughout our journey together, you will find yourself asking, why? In this case, perhaps you can imagine a handful of people rigging the system. But why would they keep doing things like this? Why would our government keep prescribing poison? I have to admit, after pledging my allegiance to a polyester flag and the republic for which it stands for my entire childhood, I do find it incredibly hard to come to terms with the thought of the government knowingly or intentionally poisoning the populace. These are the facts, though, once you realize that you've been treated like a lab rat You might wonder what other phenomena have been experiments silently carried out on us, not to mention that the result of said experiments won't be published. That knowledge is to be hoarded, not shared. In fact, all true knowledge is meant to be shrouded, according to the elite. It isn't possible for a few to rule over the many when we foster learning and generational wisdom. So that's obviously something that they seek to prohibit. Notice how I didn't use the word education. That word has been co-opted, so when you hear the word education, you think of the government-issued educational system, a reprehensible system that won't teach any life skills, a system to produce pride and soldiers, frankly. I would also agree that it is human nature to feel pride, though pride and ignorance go hand in hand. You see, while a mind full of doubt questions everything, a mind stacked with hubris finds comfort in their ignorance. Please understand, I'm not attacking you. I too am ignorant of many things. We must first become comfortable with not knowing. Say it with me. I too am ignorant of many things. I too am ignorant of many things. This is an uncomfortable thought for most, and even more uncomfortable to say out loud, although this is the first step to awakening. A young mind's thirst for knowledge is insatiable, but as we mature, the ego takes over. By the age of 13 or 14, perhaps, the ego has already crept in subconsciously. You begin to think of yourself as knowing things. After all, we were all educated so thoroughly. Why not become satisfied with our own immense knowledge of this realm? What is the issue with stoking the flame that is your pride, after all? It was earned, you may think, while recalling the massive undertaking of earning a diploma or a college degree. No, the vast majority of the texts you memorized were fallacious, either complete lies or misrepresentations of the truth, reshaping your reality into something unreal. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not going to go full Kanye, and no, I'm not going to pull a Terrence Howard. I don't wish to convince you that mathematics are fake. No, not everything was a flagrant lie, though I wouldn't be surprised if you found yourself questioning just about everything as the true nature of life unveils itself. I want to be like a sign posted at a fork in the road, pointing this way to the truth and that way to more lies. The path to truth on an incline, winding back and forth without markers to get your bearings, without pavement to gain traction. In fact, it can be unclear as to where the path is at all. You might even need to forge your own path through a thicket of deceit. Deceit, of course, making a poor substitute for lumber. Meanwhile, the path to falsehoods is a conveyor belt. You just turn your mind off and let the conveyor belt navigate the world for you. Now here is the part you are likely not ready to hear. That easy path, the one with all the lies about the world we live in, that is, of course, a metaphor. A metaphor for cable news, scientific journals, and the peer review studies that they produce. Many of you likely think that the peer review process is the highest standard. It is impossible to compromise all of one's peers, isn't it? Certainly not. Not to mention, academic journals have a tendency to only allow certain people to participate in this process. I might also allege that in order to participate in a peer review process for a scientific journal, you would also need to be part of one of many secretive groups or secretive fraternal clubs. Yes, I do believe it is true that every major academic journal cherry-picks who can participate in their peer review processes, and you better believe they know how to pick them. My point in saying all of this is, I want you to let go of the notion that you know anything at all. I'm not saying that you don't know anything. I'm just suggesting that we know so much less than we think we do about the universe that we must let go of everything we think we know. If I say to you, knowledge is power, you likely hear a cliché, a tired idiom that's lost all meaning after being parroted so many times. That being said, as you unveiled more and more fallacies, you have likely found yourself contemplating this cliché. When I was young, I laughed off this expression thinking, power is power, knowledge is knowledge. When I was a child, it just sounded like a trick to me to get me to read a book. Now, though, I can assure you, it is more than that. Knowledge is power. This is a core truth about our existence. It just isn't a physical or material power, but rather a mental, spiritual, and emotional power.